All right, so are you ready for this? We are diving deep into Genesis chapter 9 today.
Oh, yeah, I am really excited about this one.
Yeah, we've got blessings and curses and a little bit of wine-related drama and, of course, the rainbow.
The rainbow, that's always a good one.
Right, but this isn't your typical Sunday school lesson, though,
Yeah.
right? This YouTube video we're exploring frames this whole chapter as like a guide for entrepreneurs.
It's such a fascinating take, right? You wouldn't think of like ancient biblical texts as a business manual, but
I know.
there are some really interesting parallels I think we can unpack.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just jump right in and start with the very first verse where God blesses Noah and his sons.
Okay.
It feels very similar to the blessing given to Adam and Eve and then again to Seth's generation. You know,
Yeah,
it's like this repetition that kind of jumps out at you.
it does. And it's almost as if despite all of humanity's, repeated failings, God just remains committed to this idea of blessing,
Right?
of
Yeah.
enabling us to thrive. And the text even emphasizes it by repeating the phrase, be fruitful and multiply. It's not just like a one-time command,
It's just like a refrain.
It's a constant refrain throughout the early chapters of Genesis.
It makes you wonder if this blessing is automatic. Like, is it unconditional or is there something more to it? And this YouTube video presents a really interesting perspective.
Oh, yeah.
It's suggesting that God's blessing is tied to like our actions,
Okay.
to our willingness to take risks and like create something new.
That's thought-provoking, especially when you think about the context of this blessing, right? It comes immediately after the flood,
Oh, yeah.
a time of such immense destruction and loss. It's almost as if God is saying, okay, let's try this again,
Take two.
right? But this time I'm giving you all these new tools and this new level of responsibility.
And that's where things get really interesting because this blessing also comes with a twist.
Right.
The concept of dread.
Hmm.
So for the first time, animals are going to fear humans before the flood. That wasn't the case.
That's right. And the word dread is used very deliberately here. It signifies this huge shift in the power dynamic between humans and the animal kingdom. It's almost like a warning or like a recognition of humanity's capacity for both good and evil.
And if we tie that back to the entrepreneurial perspective,
Yeah.
it could be seen as a commentary on leadership,
Mm,
right? The ability to inspire both fear and respect
right.
is often seen as essential for successful leaders.
Exactly. This verse really highlights that double-edged sword of power,
Right.
It can be used to build and create, but it can also be misused and lead to destruction and suffering.
So true.
So the challenge for any leader, whether it's Noah building a new society or an entrepreneur launching a new venture, is to wield that power responsibly.
Okay, but then we run into this seemingly contradictory message about provision and blood.
Okay.
On one hand, God says every living thing is food for humans, but on the other hand, there's this very specific prohibition against eating flesh with its blood. It's confusing.
It is, and it's so important to understand the cultural context here.
Okay.
In many ancient cultures, blood was viewed as like the essence of life.
Really?
Yeah, the life force itself, so to consume blood was seen as very taboo,
Wow.
like a violation of the sacredness of life.
This reminds me of something I learned about kosher meat.
Uh-huh.
There's a whole process of removing the blood before the meat can be considered kosher.
Yes.
I didn't really understand the reason behind it, but now it makes so much sense.
I know, it's really interesting, right?
It's about recognizing the value and the dignity of the life that sustains us.
Precisely. It's not just about the physical act of eating.
Yeah.
It's about acknowledging the spiritual dimension of life
Right.
and our responsibility to treat all living creatures with respect.
Which brings us to that really powerful statement.
Yeah.
And for your lifeblood, I will require a reckoning. God makes it very clear that taking a life, whether it's human or animal, has consequences.
Right. This verse establishes like a foundational principle of justice.
Okay.
Bloodshed requires accountability. It's a concept that is just woven throughout legal systems of so many ancient cultures.
And it continues to resonate with us even today.
Absolutely.
What really struck me, though, in this video was how the speaker highlights that even animals are held accountable
Oh, wow.
for killing humans.
Interesting.
It's almost like there's this inherent understanding, even in the animal kingdom, of the sanctity of human life.
It really raises a lot of intriguing questions about animal consciousness and moral responsibility.
Yeah.
Can animals really understand the concept of like right and wrong?
Right.
Is there some form of justice that applies to the animal kingdom? These are questions that philosophers and theologians have debated for centuries,
Yeah.
and there are no easy answers.
Okay, but for now, let's shift gears a little bit
Okay.
and talk about the rainbow covenant.
All right.
It's one of the most iconic symbols in the Bible, and this YouTube video offers a really fascinating perspective on it.
It really is. The Rainbow Covenant is more than just a pretty story, you know? It's like this really profound theological statement about God's relationship with humanity.
I agree.
And what's particularly interesting here is how the speaker interprets the rainbow as like a reminder for God.
That's what really got me thinking, like, we usually think of God as this all-knowing, all-powerful being
Right.
who, like, doesn't need reminders.
Right.
But this interpretation suggests something totally different, like something way more relational,
Absolutely.
more vulnerable even.
It really challenges our preconceived notions of God's omniscience.
Totally.
And it suggests a God who chooses to engage with us on this much more personal level.
Right.
You know, remember, this covenant comes after God has witnessed just the depths of human depravity.
Boy.
And yet, instead of turning away, God chooses to make this promise,
Yeah.
this commitment to never again destroy the earth by flood.
And to seal that promise,
Yeah.
God chooses a sign, a visible reminder, not just for humanity, but like you said, for God as well.
It's like saying, I'm in this with you, humanity. I'm not giving up on you.
Even though I know you're going to mess things up again.
Exactly. And there's another layer to this whole idea of the rainbow as a reminder.
Okay.
The speaker in the video draws a parallel to their own experience with renewing covenants. Like the idea that even the most sacred agreements need to be actively nurtured and reaffirmed over time.
That really resonated with me because it made me think about the rituals and symbols in my own life
Oh, yeah.
that help me stay grounded in my commitments.
Yeah, like what kind of things?
Whether it's a wedding ring or a family heirloom
Right.
or even just a handwritten note, you know, those physical reminders can be so powerful.
They serve as anchors connecting us to our values.
Yeah.
And reminding us of the promises we've made both to ourselves and to others.
And that's something we can all relate to,
I think so.
whether we're talking about spiritual commitments or even just personal relationships.
Absolutely.
Okay, but before we get too deep into the feel-good stuff, we need to address the elephant in the room,
Oh, boy.
the story of Noah's nakedness and the curse that follows.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the more challenging passages in Genesis.
It
I'm
is.
curious to hear your thoughts.
The part I always struggle with is why Canaan, Noah's grandson, is cursed for Ham's actions.
Right.
It feels so unfair.
Yeah.
Like he's being punished for something he didn't even do. And the YouTube video mentions that proverb about fathers eating sour grapes and children's teeth being set on edge.
Yes.
And that really resonated with me.
That proverb highlights a concept that was just so prevalent in many ancient cultures.
Okay.
This idea of collective responsibility.
Ish.
Families and tribes were seen as interconnected units.
Right.
So the actions of one member could have repercussions for the entire group.
So it's less about individual blame and more about the interconnectedness of a community.
Precisely. It's a reminder that we're all part of something larger than ourselves.
Yeah.
And our actions have ripple effects that extend far beyond our immediate circle.
But it still leaves me with questions like, if we're all bound by the actions of our ancestors, does that mean we're powerless to break free from those cycles of sin and consequence?
That is the question, isn't it?
It is.
Philosophers and theologians have grappled with that for centuries.
I bet.
And there's no simple answer. But maybe that's the whole point of these biblical narratives, you know?
What do you mean?
They're not meant to be these simple moral tales with clear-cut answers.
Right.
They're meant to challenge us,
Yeah.
to make us think critically about complex issues, and to really wrestle with the ambiguities of human experience.
It's like they're holding up a mirror to us.
Yeah.
Reflecting back to us our own struggles with sin and temptation and this desire for redemption.
Exactly. And that's what makes them so relevant even thousands of years later.
Yeah.
They speak to the timeless truths of the human condition.
Okay.
Our capacity for both great love and just terrible cruelty.
Right?
Our yearning for connection and belonging.
Yeah.
And this constant search for meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain.
So as we're wrapping up our deep dive into Genesis chapter 9, what's the one thing you hope our listener will take away from this conversation?
I hope they walk away with a deeper appreciation for the complexity and richness of these ancient texts.
I think it's a good one.
They're not just historical documents. They're these living, breathing stories that continue to speak to us today.
I agree.
They offer wisdom guidance and a framework for understanding the human experience in all its messy, contradictory glory.
They remind us that we're part of a much bigger story,
Right.
a story that spans generations and encompasses the entire cosmos. And within that story, we each have a role to play,
We do.
a unique contribution to make.
Absolutely. And maybe as we go about our daily lives, we can carry that sense of wonder and purpose with us. We can choose to be the kind of people who build rather than destroy,
Yeah.
who offer hope rather than despair, and who strive to make the world just a little bit better than we found it.
That's a powerful message, and one that I think we all need to hear right now. It's just amazing how this one chapter, Genesis 9, can be like a microcosm of the entire human experience.
Yeah.
We've got creation and destruction, the
Yeah.
promise of blessing, the weight of curses, and this beautiful covenant just woven through it all.
It's such a powerful reminder that life is rarely straightforward.
Yeah.
We experience those highs and lows, those moments of grace, and then moments of just tremendous difficulty.
Right.
And it's often in those moments of difficulty, those times when we feel lost and uncertain, that we're forced to confront those big questions about who we are and what we believe.
The speaker in this YouTube video, despite approaching the text from an entrepreneur's perspective,
Right.
seems to grapple with those big questions too.
Yeah.
They talk about the challenges of leadership, the burden of responsibility, and the importance of staying true to your values, even when faced with really difficult choices.
And that's something we can all relate to, I think,
Yeah.
regardless of our profession or background.
Totally.
We all have to make choices, right?
But we do.
Choices that have consequences, not just for ourselves, but for the people around us.
Yeah.
And sometimes those choices are really hard, and we're left wondering, did I make the right decision?
That's we're constantly navigating this tension
Yeah.
between the desire for blessing and success and fulfillment,
Right.
and then the awareness that those things often come at a cost.
Mm.
We see that tension play out so clearly in the story of Noah and his sons.
Yeah.
They're given this incredible opportunity to start fresh,
It's true.
to build a new world.
A clean slate.
But even in that fresh start, there's conflict, there's brokenness, and the potential for things to go terribly wrong.
And that's just the reality of the human condition, isn't it?
It is.
We're capable of such great things, but we're also so prone to making mistakes, to hurting each other, to falling short of our own aspirations.
It's true.
But the story doesn't end there, though.
Yeah.
Even in the midst of all our failings, there's this thread of hope, this promise of redemption.
The Rainbow Covenant.
Exactly. It reminds us that God hasn't given up on us, that even when we mess things up, there's a path towards forgiveness and renewal.
And that brings me back to something you said earlier about the importance of those reminders.
Yeah.
Those symbols that help us stay grounded in our commitments.
Right, like the rainbow?
Maybe the rainbow isn't just a symbol for God. Maybe it's a symbol for all of humanity.
I like that.
A reminder of the beauty and the fragility of life.
Yeah.
The power of hope and the importance of striving for something greater than ourselves.
What a beautiful thought. And maybe that's the ultimate lesson we can glean from Genesis 9.
Okay.
It's a story about resilience, about second chances, about the enduring power of grace. It's a reminder that even in the face of destruction and despair, there's always the possibility for new beginnings, for growth, for transformation.
So to our listener, as you go about your day, your week, your life, remember that you're part of something much bigger than yourself. You have a story to tell, a contribution to make, a purpose to fulfill. And even when things get tough, remember that there's always hope, there's always beauty, and there's always the possibility for redemption.
Keep seeking those moments of awe and wonder that remind you of your place in this grand tapestry of creation, and never underestimate the power of a single act of kindness, a single moment of grace to change the world around you.